The lock clicked and then refused to turn, like the house itself had decided I'd had enough. And that was the first thing that told me this wasn't a mistake. I pulled out my phone, thumbed open the control app for my smart lock, and the screen was as blank as a power outage in an empty theater. I tried the backup card, nothing. I crouched and looked closely at the door, and my stomach went cold. The sleek smart lock I'd installed myself had been ripped out and replaced with a cheap deadbolt that looked like it belonged on a storage unit, and taped to the center of my door was a printed paper with the HOA letterhead, and the kind of sentence that makes your jaw lock up. Your home access has been revoked due to multiple violations. Violations I had never heard of, never received, never even imagined could exist. I stood there feeling ridiculous and terrified all at once, Pixel rubbing against my calf like she always did when I was about to do something questionable, and every neighbor on my block seemed to be peeking through blinds like they were waiting to see whose life would implode next. One woman caught my eye and then ducked away. That look, the look of someone who knows something and doesn't want to be involved, told me this had been coordinated, and that someone had walked into my house while I was at work, unplugged my world, and left me standing on my porch with a note taped to my door. If anyone knows how access works, it's me. I design secure networks for a living, keep locks and keys, and test cases for clients that include government contracts. I build puzzles so others can't get in. That made the whole thing laughable and terrifying at the same time. Someone thought they could outmaneuver me at my own front door. My immediate suspect lived 2 houses down and walked like she owned the street. Karen Whitmore, self-declared queen of the HOA clipboard, always out measuring tape at the ready. She hated my battery cabinet visible in the yard, my blinking lights, the way I did things my way. Her campaign to micromanage the neighborhood had been ramping up for months. Passive-aggressive notes, whispered complaints, but nobody cuts a hole in someone else's life like this. Nobody except the kind of person who confuses authority with entitlement. I didn't blow up. I didn't pound on that stupid deadbolt. I drove to a coffee shop, opened my laptop, and watched the feeds I'd built into every corner of the property. I designed redundancy for a reason, and even if they pulled surface-level tech, the deeper layers were still talking. Within minutes, a video played crisp and daylight-bold Karen standing in front of my door while a man from a generic work van unscrewed my smart lock. Her voice came through one of my planted mics, instructing how to disable the wiring, telling the guy to make it look legal enough so he doesn't have a case. I laughed low and dangerous because they had no idea what they were poking. I considered the police briefly, like anyone would, but I knew how this would go. Karen would wrap it in HOA jargon, drown it in bureaucracy, and buy time. If I wanted to win, I needed more than anger. I wanted precision. So I called a few people, a lawyer friend to make sure my steps were legally solid, a locksmith to ready a legal re-entry when the time came, and a college buddy in digital forensics I trusted to laugh with me at the audacity. Then I went to Miguel's for dinner and acted like everything was fine while I planned the undoing. Karen spun her narrative fast. We voted, it's in the bylaws. We had complaints, and neighbors who didn't want to poke the hornet's nest nodded along. She thought her badge meant immunity. She thought the clipboard was a shield. But I'd been taking notes, and not just on paper. I placed a tiny, unassuming device behind a planter that looked like a soil sensor directional antenna cloaked listening for funny business. I activated a honeypot, a deliberately weak-looking Wi-Fi named HOA access control, the kind of obvious bait an arrogant meddler might think was the only thing between them and real control. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it is quiet, and it makes people trip over their own arrogance. Within hours, the honeypot lit up like a neon sign. An older Android tablet, badly out of date, reached for credentials with hands that were clumsy enough to be suspicious dictionary attacks, clipboard grabs, a file upload called access_override.js. The device traced back to the clubhouse. I smiled because evidence was one thing, a pattern was another. I watched keystrokes and timestamps and finally saw through the screen a face I'd seen in neighborhood emails, Dylan Karen's son, headset on tablet open, overheated in curiosity and entitlement. He downloaded a file I left just for idiots, HO_AC_codes.txt, and the moment he did it triggered a location ping that put him squarely in the clubhouse back room. I could have called the cops then. Instead, I built the beachhead around the evidence I needed. I collected metadata, timestamped logs, and audio that the tablet's microphone unmuted and arrogant didn't realize it was broadcasting. I had Karen instructing someone out loud, "This will shut him up. We'll say it was a safety threat and the clip was crystalline in its cruelty." She'd given me her voice, her intent, and with it the undoing of every smug step she had taken. The next move was simple theater. I walked into the HOA clubhouse documents under my arm, deed county regulations, the architectural approval for my battery cabinet, and dropped them on the table where Karen was holding court. Calmly, I played the clip. Her face went white in the sort of way that makes people realize they're suddenly the villain in their own play. The board members shuffled. One named Lindsay looked like a kid caught in someone else's fight. She later told me she hadn't even known about the vote. Karen had forged signatures, manufactured emails, and used proxy domains registered just weeks prior, all pointing back to her home network. She'd tried to rig the governance system the way a bad hacker tries to rig a scoreboard, petty, obvious, and full of arrogance. Once you have a trail, everything becomes a breadcrumb path to the truth. A friend in digital forensics turned what I had into a technical report that made the forgery obvious to anyone who'd read it for 5 minutes. A phone call to a neighbor revealed stories, retroactive fines, mysterious permit delays, porch swings removed under threat. The more I peeled back, the uglier and more methodical it looked, a campaign of small humiliations masquerading as civic duty. I wasn't out for revenge. I wanted the system fixed. I wanted accountability. So I made a quiet flyer, 1 page. "Do you know what your HOA board is really doing?" And a link to a folder with context documents and raw footage. And I pinned it to the community board. People downloaded it 3 times in 15 minutes. Lindsay among them. The dominoes started to wobble. Once your neighbors see the evidence, the narrative flips. Fear becomes outrage. We scheduled things so that the evidence would land when eyes were scanning for weekend mail, an email sent to the whole directory on a Friday at 7 with a clear subject. I was locked out, but now we all deserve to know who holds the key. By Saturday, the neighborhood had erupted. Emergency meetings, printed copies passed door to door, people calling each other pie left on my porch with an apology note. Small human things that meant more than any headline. The clubhouse, meanwhile, was a different story. An inspector turned up with a clipboard for unrelated issues and found a folder labeled Emergency Lockout Authority, with pages stamped with a logo that didn't match the HOA's real one. Paint cans, improperly stored exposed wiring, flammable junk packed into a closet, and tucked there the paper trail Karen used to make herself a ruler. Formal complaints followed. The county housing representative sat in the clubhouse and, with a phrase as simple as "sufficient cause," suspended Karen from her duties. My lawyer filed a civil suit that wasn't about money, it was about discovery. Lawsuits let us pull back the curtain. They forced devices and emails and deleted threads into the light. There were receipts for illegal gear, a son who had used someone else's credentials to buy surveillance tools, voice memos that read like confessions. The judge ordered full discovery. The DA took an interest. The woman who once prided herself on being the enforcer of small rules was suddenly the person everyone wanted to investigate. When the hearing came, I played a short clip in court. The judge didn't need a lecture, he needed a pattern, and it was right there. Audio, digital logs, forged votes. He ordered the case forward, and for the first time since that deadbolt clanged on my door, I felt a kind of relief I hadn't expected, not vindictive, but clean. The locks on our lives had been abused, and now they were being returned to their proper owners. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood felt lighter. People put porch swings back, flower pots returned to stoops, and for the first time in a long time I heard laughter that didn't sound carefully measured. A new board formed under Mrs. Jenkins, a retired principal with a spine of oak and a love for transparency. Meeting minutes went up in real time. Violation notices came with timestamps and photos. Power is a dangerous thing when left unchecked, and our little community learned that lesson the hard way. What I learned wasn't a neat moral you can hang on a wall. It was quieter. Power reveals people, but evidence reveals power. People who want to control will try to make rules into weapons, and they rely on silence and the neighbor's unwillingness to look. Document the moment, record the voice, keep backups in more than one place. Fight if you have to, with method and with patience, because explosions are satisfying but often empty. Precision is what changes systems. When the judge referred parts of the case to the DA, when Karen's name disappeared from the roster, when her son left town and her mailbox filled up with notices she couldn't hide from, there was, yes, a sweet satisfaction. Justice wasn't a gavel slamming down in a single thunderclap. It was a slow unlocking one door at a time until the house that belonged to me felt like mine again. Pixel curled on my lap that night as I added a final component to the system, a voice and face panel that would only answer me, and the screen greeted me with a soft beep. Welcome back, Alex. It was a small thing, but it felt like home. So here's the part I want you to sit with, not because I want to preach, but because I want you to think. When someone uses rules to hide cruelty, who is responsible for calling it out? Is it the person with the loud voice, the quiet neighbor who took a flyer, the tech guy who left the breadcrumbs, or the people who finally chose to look? And when power wears a smile and a clipboard, do we punish the person or the system that makes their behavior possible? If you've ever wondered whether to speak up about a petty injustice that felt too small to matter, share it. Tell me what you did or what you wish you'd done. Did the neighborhood turn on you? Did you win? Did you lose? I want to know how your story ended, and if you think the doors in your life open to the right people. Share your experience below. And if you liked this, tell someone. Maybe our stories are the only keys some folks need.